Hey, what's up, everybody? Tim Albrecht here, and welcome to this week's episode of the Ask a YFP CFP segment of the Your Financial Pharmacist Podcast, where we feature questions from you, the YFP community, to be answered by one of our very own fee-only certified financial planners. Please note this podcast is intended for educational purposes and should not be considered financial or investment advice, as we do not know all the variables to one's personal situation when answering a question. Before we jump into today's question, a shout out to our extraordinary YFP financial planning team that makes this segment possible. Your Financial Pharmacist offers fee-only comprehensive financial planning services that are customized to the pharmacy professional. So whether you want to pay off your student loans, make the right investment decisions, or simply build a solid financial plan, we'll help get your income working for you rather than the other way around. You can learn more by visiting yfpplanning.com. Again, that's yfpplanning.com. Okay, this week's question comes from Liz in Lexington, Kentucky.
Hi, this is Liz from Lexington, Kentucky. I have a question for the YFP community. I routinely use Credit Karma to monitor my credit score, and today in February, I logged in and found both my TransUnion and Equifax reports dropped my credit score about 25 points each. The options with Credit Karma to see the changes said that there were no changes to my credit. I have been paying on my student loans during the pandemic, and I've always paid all of my bills and credit cards in full and on time. I have no other debt besides my student loans and no recent credit checks. Looking at my Credit Karma history, my score has only dropped when it sees a balance on my credit card, meaning that there's a balance but it's not due yet to be paid, and I routinely use under 10% of my total credit, and this month it was about 3%. Can you explain why a credit score would drop so much with no major changes? Thanks.
Thank you, Liz, for submitting your question to be featured on this week's Ask a YFP CFP segment of the Your Financial Pharmacist Podcast. Tim Baker, what are your thoughts?
This is a really curious question because, Liz, there's so many things that you hit on in this question that plays into like your credit score. And I, like you, I'm a big advocate and user of Credit Karma. I think, it's one of the things that I check regularly or get alerts from regularly. And I'll share one of the alerts that I recently got that might be the reason for why the dip in score, even though, you were not alerted. So a lot of the things that Liz talks about with her situation is the fact that you're paying on loans and credit cards and you basically being satisfactory in that regard. No hard inquiries that basically can also, affect your score. And the other big thing that she talks about is keeping her credit card utilization below that 10%, which is puts you into the excellent category with regard to the credit score calculation. So, the big credit factors, which again, Credit Karma does a great job of kind of outline, are like payment history. Are people lending you money and are you paying those back on time? The credit card utilization, and basically what she's referring to here is, if I have a credit card limit of $10,000 and I'm regularly carrying below $1,000 on that card, that's under 10%. That's typically excellent. Anything that's above that, you go to good, to fair, to poor. And then when you miss payments, you typically get derogatory marks, which she said, I'm all good here. The other factors that typically play a part here, and I think two that might come into play for you, Liz, are age of credit. So like how long you've been basically in the game, your total amount of accounts. So in my mind, I would think that less would be better, but it's actually the more, the better. So creditors like to see that, it's not your first rodeo and that you have, I think the number for being excellent here is 20 or better. For pharmacists, this ain't no thing because typically every disbursement of your student loans counts as an account. Typically pharmacists reach that very, very easily. And then the last thing that is hard inquiries, which she said, I haven't had any of those. So typically whenever you get if you go to a new cell phone provider, you apply for utilities for an apartment, or, you buy a car, you need financing, or you buy a house and you need financing, they're going to pull your credit. And they penalize you for that because they don't want people to kind of go all around town just to try to fish for credit to see who's going to give them credit. So they want to make sure that you're kind of targeting your approach. So what I would do if I'm in your situation is I would pull the credit report immediately. So I think you mentioned TransUnion and Equifax, which is what Credit Karma use. I would pull probably both of those reports, and I would just see if there's anything on there that looks odd. I actually had one of these. So I try to pull my credit report every time the clocks change. So I actually had an old X, one of our joint credit cards popped up on my report just by, I don't know why. So I had to go in and dispute that. So that had actually moved my credit score quite a bit. The other thing, so it could be something kind of funky like that. The other thing that I'm thinking of is sometimes, and I recently got an alert for this. So like I had a Kohl's credit card like from back in the day that I never used. And because I didn't use it, it basically was canceled. So the account was canceled. So sometimes if that was an older account that I set up, in 2008 or whatever it was, my average age of credit could go from where I was 15 years or whatever to cut that down pretty significantly. So for me, it didn't really move the needle that much. I did get an alert, but not all creditors on your report are created equal. So the Credit Karma app alerted me, but sometimes that doesn't necessarily happen. So what I would do is pull the credit, see if there are accounts on there that should have been on there that kind of fell off. And if you have old credit reports, then you kind of can do a before and after. That's even better. If you think about it, these accounts that are in good standing, they'll stay on your credit report for 10 years. So it could be that something that's very, very, long ago in your past fell off. To me, it should be one of those two things. It should be either kind of a weird thing that popped up on your credit report that shouldn't be there. And that happens actually more often than people think. I think there are a lot of stats out there that people that typically check their credit report after a while, like, it's something like 30% find errors. Don't quote me on that. And errors enough to that actually moves your score. So that would be the first thing. And then, potentially look at, are there old accounts that maybe fell off that really diminished your age of credit, which is a big driver. It's funny because like when I started in financial planning, we never talked about credit score, credit report. And primarily that was because we serviced people that were in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, and we still do. But that's not necessarily a concern. There's stats out there that say like once you're in your 50s, it's like half of people in their 50s have a score that's like above 720. When you get to in your 60s, it's like 62% are above 720. And then in your 70s, it's almost like 78%. But then it's the flip side. When you're in your 30s, it's something like 15% have a score above 720. And these are typically years that you're really taking on good amounts of debt, either through loans, which is not a big driver in the rate, but home mortgage, house, those types of things. When you're in their 30s, it's typically closer to like that 25%. So we talk about that a lot because your credit score, just like your balance sheet, is going to be a big driver on what steers, kind of your debt service. And again, like we talk about, we really want clients to have efficient debt service, that they're paying the least amount for what they owe, but then also efficient tax strategies, investment strategies. So it's a great question, but that would be the rabbit hole that I would go down is, are there things that fell off, or if there are things that were added to your report that should not be there? Because 25 points, that's a big move. So something significant has happened.
Great stuff, Tim. And I think this question and your response is a good reminder for the community of checking those reports. And I like your suggestion. You mentioned when the clocks change, but having some type of rhythm where you're checking these often. And for those folks that are not using a tool like Credit Karma or Credit Sesame or one of those other tools, you can go to annualcreditreport.com, request your free credit reports there. And I think, find a system, find a rhythm to make sure this is a priority as you consider it an important part of the financial plan, which it is. And we talked about this on episode 162, where you and I talked about Credit 101, all things surrounding credit, importance of credit, understanding your credit report, credit security, and so on. So make sure to check out that episode. And Liz, again, thank you for the question and giving us an opportunity to talk about this important topic in more detail. So as a small thank you to Liz for submitting this question, we're going to be sending her a super comfy YFP t-shirt. And if you'd like to have a question featured on an upcoming episode, please go to yourfinancialpharmacist.com/askyfp or send us an email at info@yourfinancialpharmacist.com. Have a great rest of your week.